Can you hear me? There we go. I'm delighted that all of you are here. We even have people from Houston, from St. Philip. We are so happy to have you here, Judith and Kelly, and Reverend Cho, and all the rest of you. This is wonderful. I'm introducing Colby May, who conducted an energy audit, 2 of them, for us. The last one was in April. And he's going to talk to us about his recommendations, first his findings, and then his recommendations. And I wanted you to know he's got a book that I got Amazon, wherever I found it, a little book. And if you want one, he's going to send me a link to it, and so you can let me know if you want one of these little books. You can also see our energy audit online if you'd like to have some entertaining reading. And with that, Colby, thank you.
Hear me? Hello, hello. Test. Can you hear me good? Well, all right. Well, my name is Colby May. Thank you guys very much I actually drove over from Austin, so it was a nice, pretty drive. I didn't have to go through Houston. I can hop on 99 and go north. So if I don't have to go through Houston, I don't want to. So anyways, it's great to be here. So thank you all very much for really taking the time to hear this. Obviously, what we do is very niche, right? We have a heart for the local church. We have a heart for missions, God's call to make disciples of all nations. And we have a passion for being good stewards, thinking outside the box, and energy management. So and I'd love this to be as interactive as we can. So, right? So I'm a certified energy manager. Anybody here ever heard of a certified energy manager? Bonus points if you have.
It's in your bio.
It's in my bio, so you've heard of it, so bonus points. So basically, I am certified to manage energy, right? I went to Texas Tech.
Yay.
Do we have any other Red Raiders here? We have a few.
Patrick Mahomes.
You know, I know Patrick Mahomes. I'm excited. I'm going to be rooting for him next week. I'm in Austin, so I'm usually outnumbered. My entire family loves University of Texas, Amanda May. We've been married 23 years and 2 boys. Let me move it down just a little bit. 2 boys. One's a junior, loves baseball, so we're doing the college visits, and one's a freshman. So anyhow, I'm a certified energy manager. I'm also an ordained pastor. Has anybody here heard of Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary? A few, right? So, in 2001, we really got into the energy management field, and we were retained by the State Energy Conservation Office, so I won't even get into that, but they retained the firm we were in, and we did energy audits at over 5,000 schools, mostly in Houston, including Houston ISD, but in Texas, we have 1,100 school districts, right? And many of those districts like Houston ISD, like Cy-Fair, have 300 plus campuses. So that's where that high number, but it's kind of this tent-making job. I didn't know what God was doing at the time, but I just was paying the bills and working for the family and just trying to put food on the table, but just got this unique interest in energy management. Fast forward 2012, has anybody seen the movie Taken, but with Liam Neeson? Right? God can work in a lot of ways, and he can work through Hollywood too, and he knows I like action movies, and he met me there, but I just had this like human trafficking and child trafficking. Why, as a culture, would we have such a twisted and perverted worldview? And I wanted to understand it from a biblical basis. So I went to Gordon Conwell, and during that time, I started interning with an organization called World Relief, and we went to Congo, and I wrote my thesis in Congo during the Kivu conflict, part of the Rwandan genocide overflow. So in November of 2013, I got to see really the local church, not a divided, but churches in Congo come together to be a light in really dark, vulnerable times. And I won't get into all the atrocities, but they say you can find all of Africa's problems in Congo. So when we went there, I really fell in love with the country, but more than that, I saw the tie where the local church was using and leveraging just God's resources to make an impact and to be a light. So I said, this is what I want to do. But now, what does energy management have anything to do with missions? So I started this company called Energy for Purpose, where we perform in-depth energy audits at churches around the nation. Obviously, we're in Austin, so we do quite a bit here in Houston. But the heart, and I'll share that here in a second, but the heart is to promote stewardship, but also fund missions, right? If we can encourage churches to redirect just 10%, there's 400,000 churches in the U.S. If we can just capture 10% at no cost, which is very, very doable, and redirect that to the call of missions, we could redirect $1 billion from energy spend to ministry spend. So that's kind of basically who we are, what we do. We have an office of 4 people in Congo. We have a small office in Myanmar. But here in the U.S., we perform the energy audits. We pour out the savings in some of the mission work we do in Congo. I'm not going to get into that. My job is to talk more about energy management. So the tie. So again, I want to talk about energy management specifically. I want to talk about what has the church done in regards to energy management. But third, we want you guys to be able to take things home with you so you can begin seeing change at home. So some of the things we talk about, I don't know if you might or might not agree, so let's get some healthy dialogue. I'd love it. Let's talk about some of these things and push in. So, all right. So, all right, church facts. According to State of the Plate 2013, all 400,000 churches, we tithe about $50 billion to the U.S. church. Now, that's Protestant and Catholic churches, but 20% of that, our second largest budget item behind salaries, is energy spend, is utilities. 20% or $10 billion of that $50 billion tithe is going to utilities, right? Now, let me say this. Gas prices are expected to increase by 300%. This church doesn't have a lot of gas, but Entergy still produces electricity using gas. So you're going to see electric costs increase even more. So that $10 billion spend is going to increase. But according to the EPA, a lot of the facts that we do is based on the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Energy. But 30% of the energy we use is wasted, which means, and now this is easier said than done because facility managers or whoever's managing energy for the church, you're not just wearing one hat, you're wearing 20 different hats. And as a response, the average church facility individual, whoever's in charge of energy management, is more in reactive mode and not proactive mode. So we could conceivably, if you want to go to the next slide, we have in our capacity, we could save and redirect 30% of our energy use. And I know, again, that's easier said than done, but 30% of our energy use from energy spend to ministry and mission spend. That's $3 billion that could be redirected. So that's, obviously you can kind of see our heart, see our mission, and why we do what we do. A lot of the energy audits we do, we don't charge percentage of savings. If we can get grants to cover what we do, that's what our heart is. So we've done 2 audits at this church. Very grateful for David, Cindy, and the team, and very hands-on. What y'all have is very irregular. There's not a lot of churches that have people that are this passionate about earth care and just being good stewards of God's creation. So hats off to you and your team. Obviously, we do a lot of churches, so we don't see that very often. So anyhow, well done, well done. Yeah. But I will say, regarding energy management, the reason it's hard to save that 30% is because things get in the way, right? We're either not going. So I went to Gordon Conwell. I know I said that, but at one time we had 20 people that worked on the facility maintenance team. Now, budgets are tight with seminaries. What do you think the first thing that they cut is when budgets are tight? Yes, staff on the maintenance side. So they went from 20 individuals to like 7. So in a seminary that has 1 million square feet, what do you think that does to the maintenance staff? They're no longer proactive. Now they are in reactive, putting out snow, steam pipe leaks, and they're just in emergency. And that's their emergency maintenance, which is expensive maintenance. So it's not proactive. So there's a lot of things that get in the way, and I understand. So our church is the same way. We want to be proactive, but resources won't allow us to be as proactive as we want. So these are some of the things that kind of get in the way. Next slide. I won't get into this, but why is energy management important? Why should we focus on energy management? There's so many. Obviously, it's our second biggest budget item. Gas costs are going to increase by 300%, and you're already seeing that. I talked about this. We have too many responsibilities. We're called to be good stewards of God's creation. That doesn't mean that word actually, when you translate it, it means manager. God has called us to manage his resources, and that just doesn't happen, right? We have to think outside the box. We have to be proactive. We have to think strategically in regards to managing our household, so to speak. All right? So, okay, question. What do you think regarding a building's energy efficiency, right? What do you think of these four make the largest impact on a building's energy consumption? Who here thinks it's LEED, being LEED, basically the efficiency, okay? Who here thinks HVAC has the largest impact on the building's energy? Who here thinks lighting? Who here thinks occupant behavior? You've seen the audit. So I'm going to show you some stats here, but HVAC is typically in Houston 50 to 70% of your energy bill for a commercial property. It's different it's based on what kind of system you have, how large your building is, how strong your building envelope is. So many things go into play, but with the humidity of Houston, 70% of your energy bill, electric and gas, up to 70% is related to your HVAC. But even if I have a Cadillac system and I don't know how to operate it, I'm going to be using a lot more energy than I had previous. So behavior, yes, HVAC has the largest impact, but behavior impacts every little thing that we do. And again, I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about how the church has been pursuing all of these things. And I want to share things with you that you can take home and begin to steward your utility well. Now, my wife and I like to disagree about the thermostat. I like it a little hotter. She likes it a little colder. So we have our internal battles going on. But that doesn't happen here, I'm sure, in regards to energy points, right?
We're all in agreement on almost everything.
Yeah, great, man. That's amazing. Which do you think receives the least amount of attention? HVAC, lighting, LEED, or behavior? You can see where I'm going here, right? It's behavior. Go ahead, next slide. Occupant behavior. So look at these stats. These are the stats. An office building and a school, and churches typically are in the middle of these. So this is a stat from southern states where they just really mapped the energy use of a specific commercial property. Again, look at HVAC 50, and 62%, 54 and 62%. Sorry, I left my glasses in the car. When I typically do an energy audit, the first thing somebody will say is like, that's great, but we just changed our lights to LED. That's excellent, but that's just a small piece of the puzzle. Look at HVAC and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. We're going to talk about set points and what has the church done to help mitigate that. We're going to look at plug load, things you plug into the wall, domestic hot water thing, et cetera. But anyways, that just kind of shows you where this, so to speak, the state of the plate for churches regarding energy use. Any questions so far?
So which one is closer associated to a church, the office building or the school?
Well, I would say right in the middle, because some churches have schools. Some of the the administrative areas are open 8 to 5, but churches are unique because you have things on Wednesday night, Saturday, Sunday. So I would say churches fall right in the middle. But again, Houston, I would say HVAC is on the higher end. Okay, all right, next slide. So one thing, very exciting, we're going to talk about utility bills, and I can tell y'all are excited. But this is important. It's like a gas gauge to a car. My wife doesn't pay a lot of, I'm glad she's not here because I'm really picking on her a little bit. She doesn't always pay attention to the gas gauge, and I'll get a call about once a year. It's like, can you come pick me up? I'm on the side of the road. But benchmarking or understanding your utility bills is like a gas gauge in a car. When you know what you have in the tank, you make better informed decisions. EPA, matter of fact, says you can save up to 7 to 10% just by understanding utility bills. So let's understand utility bills. Let's go ahead and skip this slide. So when you're looking at your residential utility bill, you're going to see electric, and electric is identified what? Kilowatt hours, right? And if it's gas, what do you think gas, your measurement in gas, if you read it, what is that typically the measurement? Yeah, therms, CCF, something like that. There's usually, basically, if I take my particular month, when I turn on my electricity, right, whatever I use in that specific month, I multiply, I'm charged that times whatever my retail electric provider rate is. Same thing with gas. But for churches, for commercial properties, does anybody here, I know we're talking a lot, everybody has a home, et cetera, but does anybody here kind of manage a commercial property or involved in decision-making for a commercial property? Okay. Well, there's one thing from the church point of view. Usually when a larger facility like this, you're charged something that's called demand. Again, not for your homes, but the church is, and nearly every church is. If I take my month, you see that graph at the bottom? If I take my month and I break it into 15-minute increments, whatever my highest one-time 15-minute increment is, that's what the utility company is going to charge you. So say I just hover around 100 kilowatts every 15 minutes, just average. And then one hot July day, I turn everything electric on at the same time. What's going to happen to my kilowatts? It's going to spike. And even for 1 15-minute, if that 100 average spikes to 315, for example, and then back down, I'm not charged the average. I'm charged that 1 15-minute peak times $10 to $12 in the Houston area. In the PUC, the public utility, it's fair because they have to, when I have a peak, I need larger lines. The utility company says, I have to make sure that our capacity can handle that much energy. So they're going to charge you for that. So a lot of the things we're going to talk about today is not just how to save energy on a long-term basis, but it's not just how much energy I use, but it's the rate at which I use it. So you'll see a lot of people, we do stagger start, not turning everything on at the same time, but turning this unit on this time, this one on this time, just a way to mitigate energy use and energy spikes. Any questions? Nobody's asleep. That's a good thing. All right. This is just an example of peak demand. If I have a larger motor, like a 100 horsepower motor and a 10 horsepower motor, which one's going to reach 60 kilowatts faster? The larger one, right? It takes it an hour, which it might take that one 10 hours. So point being, the utility company is going to require higher demand, larger wires, larger transformer capacity, a larger power plant, and they're going to pass that off to the client, to the church. All right. So an example, and then we're going to talk about the church. So this is, one thing about utility and understanding utility bills, it tells you a story, right? So this is a school in Houston. I'm not going to name them, but what do you see wrong with this graph here? Yes, good job, right? It tells you a story. You'll be a great energy auditor, right? But look at the summer months. Why June, July, and August? What is going on, and why am I peaking when I don't have school in the summer months? In Houston, that's incredibly expensive. I won't even go into all the different types of demand there's 4 different types of demand. Again, I won't get into it. But without even auditing and assessing, what are some of the things some opportunities you see right here? Without even doing an audit, what's one thing that you would recommend?
Change your school year days.
Change your school.
You're not in August as much, and you start a little later because that's the hot
Yeah.
days. You're using the most electricity.
And when's the hottest time in Texas? August. And I know schools still sometimes overlap into August. Yes, ma'am.
Could you repeat what other people are saying on that side that I can't?
Sure. Well, one of the things she said was, we can just encourage them not to have, change their schedule, right? Adopt a summer schedule instead of having an 8 to 5 schedule. You see their energy use. And one of the things, when's the hottest time in Texas? And they said, August. So we need to be careful when we use energy in August. So let me show you some of the things that we have found on the next slide. Well, instead of operating 10 hours a day, we encourage them to change their schedule to like 2 to 3 hours a day. In Houston, you still have to wring out that humidity, right? You still have to dehumidify. Also, and I don't recall if y'all have outside air damper control at this church. I'm sure you probably will in potential new systems, but no? Oh, okay, yeah. So outside air dampers are open. At this school, they not only were they running a summer schedule, but they had their outside air dampers open. That's really expensive because when the air comes into the building, now I have to wring the humidity out of it. And you have all this electric reheat. I won't get into all the science, but it's just really expensive. So I told them, instead of dehumidifying from 2 to 6, the hottest time of the day, for 4 hours, let's just dehumidify for an hour and a half. And I won't get into all the rest of it, but this is all no-cost change. Go ahead, next slide. This school saved $40,000 just by changing the way they operate their HVAC. It makes a difference. You don't have to run 68-degree cooling 24 hours a day because it's so expensive. It's so expensive, and we'll talk about that. One more quick example, and then show a couple slides of the church in regards to energy efficiency. This is another hospital slash in kind of by Kima area. I mean, I won't get into all this, but just looking at this, the gas use is still high. Gas use should not be that high in Houston. Gas heat shouldn't be that high in Houston. Same thing, but one of the things, right, utility bills tell you a story. On the next slide, basically, the upper left-hand corner is their schedule. What do you see wrong with the schedule? There's no schedule. It's on 24 hours a day. They had their heating system on 100% of the time, and they had their cooling system on 100% of the time, fighting each other. And again, this one facility saved $40,000 just by changing the way that we operate. So now let's look at the church. Let's look at, so this is the kilowatt hours, right? Just if I take my month and I just measured the electric use, not demand right now, we're just looking at kilowatt hours. These are the peaks for the church over, and can y'all read that? Kinda-ish. I don't have my glasses. But if you notice those peaks, these are some of the things we found and some opportunities that the church is really looking at. So they set their peak in February. Y'all set your electric peak, kilowatt hours in February, which means the electric heat. So we see that as like, that shouldn't be. There's 3 different buildings, and again, I can't read it because I don't have my glasses on, but those are 3 different buildings. You see and sorry if I had a little pointer. Yeah. And the
Hendricks building on the bottom.
The Hendricks is the bottom.
Yeah, sorry. And so you see the CHEB, whatever Hendricks building, that's pretty flat, but the sanctuary and the education building peak. So in my mind, I know you need heat, and I know electric heat is expensive, but in Houston, that's never the case. It never spikes. So I thought maybe there's some simultaneous heating and cooling going on. So these are some of the things that we've identified, and the team is starting to implement and starting to make changes. So,
You want me to get your glasses?
no, I'm good. Okay, unless I just start squinting real bad. I'm sorry. That was 2020. Yeah, it was over 3.
That was during the freeze then. That was the
Yeah, it might have been, but if you go back one slide, it still spikes in 21, 22. Yeah, 20 was the freeze or 21, but it still spikes in the other winter months too. So I see that as opportunity. That's no cost opportunity.
Which one of those lines is the sanctuary? Is it the first one?
middle line.
That's encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah. We can spend a lot of time just pushing into this, and maybe Cinda can send out the PowerPoint or presentation if y'all wanted to look at this and study it more. This is also in the energy audits too, if y'all wanted to kind of push into it more. And I'm happy to go over the energy audit, with anybody that's interested.
Kobe, there are also anomalies such as today, it's warm enough to set up the air conditioner.
Correct.
And it's not nearly what the setting is for the
Yeah, absolutely. I was in Wyoming doing an audit.
Repeat what he said.
He also said, sorry, there's anomalies. So like today's anomaly, it's 65 degrees. You don't need the heat. And I don't think the heat really is. Yeah. I was in Wyoming working with like 10 churches last week, and it was negative 45 degrees. And then eventually warmed up. Like, I was like, no, thank you. I want to come back to Houston, please. Yeah. But that's where I want to be in the summer months. But these are the demands, and you bring up a good point. Was the freeze 21 or 20? 21. So there's a spike, but you also see another spike in 22, right? And you see another spike in 23. So I think it all goes back. One of the things we're going to talk about is centralizing the control of the thermostats. I'm jumping ahead, but one of the reasons I think, well, you can go ahead and go back if you don't mind, is we have decentralized thermostats here. I guess I'm saying we. I'll keep saying we. But somebody will hit hold, right? And it's hard for the staff to go and check every single thermostat every single day. So what if, and I know we're already doing this in certain areas, right? But we're moving over to more of a centralized control system, away from programmable to more of a centralized Wi-Fi enabled thermostats where you can control it from your phone, your computer. But the better control, the more you're going to save while still keeping a healthy building. You don't want people to freeze and wear jackets, all the time. But do I have to control 100% of the building if I'm only using a portion of it? And I know churches are different. You know your building better than I know your building. So maybe there's some compromises in some of the things that we talk about. All right, let's talk about a plan real quick. Hey, when's my hard stop? About 5? Oh, 6, an hour and a half? Well, we'll probably be done about 5-ish, and then we can just have some Q&A or if you have any questions. So one of the things we do, we'll talk about an energy plan. It's hard to save. It's hard to build a house without a blueprint. It's hard to start an effective building without a building plan. And in our opinion, it's hard to save energy without some kind of plan. So let's look at a plan. Obviously we're going to talk about the church, but these are the different influencers and things that we're looking at. Right, HVAC, we talked about that. Lighting, what kind of lights do you have? How many fixtures? Are the lights on all the time? Can we turn some of the lights off if it's by windows? These are things that we look at when we assess. The rule of thumb, has anybody seen Mythbusters? I'm jumping ahead again. They did a study that if you turn if you're out of your classroom or your office or whatever longer than 23 seconds, it pays to turn your lights off. So they did a study, and the payback, there is a surge when you turn your lights on, but the payback is 23 seconds. So it's called the 23-second rule. So that's why you see all these wonderful signs above the light switches throughout the church. Please turn off the lights. It makes a difference. It makes an impact. So I'm going to go into each one of these kind of as we talk about that respective topic, but some of the things that we identified in our energy audit at this church, and we've done two. We've done one in 2015, and we did one here in 2022, or 23, excuse me. But identified controls, I think that's the biggest opportunity. As part of that, we looked at low-cost opportunities. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at HVAC, briefly, lighting, and then building envelope. So next slide, please. These are the common types of HVAC. Let's just really talk about the ones that the churches have or most of your homes will have. So next slide, please. Chiller and a boiler. So y'all have a chiller for the educational building, correct? It's just an older chiller. I think is 2000 or maybe even older than that. I forgot. I should have looked at the energy audit before. But you have it. Yeah. And chiller, it's good in a sense. It's typically your most efficient system, but this type of chiller is just older. The current chiller might operate at like 97% efficiency. This one's probably below 80% efficiency. So, and it doesn't offer you a lot of control, but basically a chiller provides chilled water or some kind of liquid that goes to an air handling unit. That air handling unit will then pump that conditioned air into that respective zone. You also have a boiler, right? Do y'all have a boiler? Okay, so I won't even talk about a boiler. but it's the same mentality. So those are some of the typical HVAC systems you have. There's also packaged rooftop units. Go ahead, yeah, next slide. Packaged rooftop units and split systems. There's a number of packaged rooftop units behind the building in a yard. Here, basically, that packaged rooftop unit produces its own cooling and airflow into a respective zone. All right, there's going to be a test after this, so make sure y'all remember what we're saying. In your homes, you typically have what we call a split system. All right, where you have a condensing unit outside and you have a furnace on the inside, right? Or an air handler on the inside that provides. So these are the types of systems when we're analyzing a church such as yours. That's what we're looking at. And I will say this: do you see? I don't know. In this church, on the coils, do you have, are they tagged, or do people like to write so and so loves so and so? No, not y'all. If your coils are crushed by as little as 10%, same thing at your home, go and check your home, you can lose up to 30% of the efficiency of that unit. So now going back and trying to comb those back, it's a lot easier. I mean, sometimes you can't do it, it's too hard. So some of the things that you can do is when you get new units, add coil guards over them. Or in Houston, we get a lot of hailstorms, right? Add coil guards or hail guards over them so somebody, first of all, you won't get the damage and somebody won't write, whatever in the coils and impact the efficiency of the unit. So these are some of the things that you can look at. All right, next slide. It's the most expensive portion of the bill, right? We need to identify the type of system, the size of the system, the fuel source, et cetera. Let's go to the next slide. So the current system that the church has, right, you have the older chiller system, and you have a number of HVAC units, like package units. And so when we were doing the energy audit of the church, this is what we identified, right? We want to spend a lot of time analyzing HVAC. Why? Yes, because it's the largest portion, so it's important. So these are some of the things as part of the church we identified. We created an energy management, like an inventory, and we just, on each inventory, like, here's the cost if you consider replacing the unit today, here's the payback, here's the efficiency difference, and here's the incentive or the rebates from the utility company. So if you have any aging equipment at your homes, just please reach out to the utility company first, because they offer rebate money to help you offset that by about 25%. Same thing with lighting, anything energy-wise the utility company has. So make sure you reach out to Entergy or whoever your provider is. So how has the church responded? Since the audit we did in 2015, the church has, I think y'all have changed out about 8 units, if I'm not mistaken, right? I think about 8 units. So you're moving forward, and that's an efficiency impact. So you're going from units that are probably less than 70% efficiency to units that are 95% efficient. So that savings is paying for that unit over a specific time. So these are some of the things in regards to equipment that the church has done. Anything else? Did you want me to kind of mention that? All right. Next slide. Now, what is the church considering in the future? One of the things that you're looking at in the education building, you have a chiller, and you correct me if I'm wrong, please. You have a chiller, but it doesn't have great control, correct? So it really much just condition, even if I'm just using one area of that, of the education building, I have to condition the entire building. So we're looking at options. I think they've retained, you're considering retaining a professional engineer. We have Chris Cart, yeah. And he's looking at new efficient designs that's not just gonna, instead of this unit running constant volume, it's gonna vary. And instead of running the entire building, it's going to just condition the zone that it needs. So these are some of the things that the churches are doing regarding energy, regarding HVAC. All right, next slide. Now again, control, right? There's different types of control. And as I mentioned, right, how can we move from a decentralized to more of a centralized, right? We have an energy management. Are y'all looking at energy management, some kind of control system for the new chiller?
Yes.
That'll be.
New
It will have a programmable.
Explore additional options,
Yes, sir.
but what makes most sense, because that's utilized by 10 or 12 different
Sure. Okay.
people, and the room's heated and cooled differently,
Sure.
and it's already got individual thermostats in each of the rooms. So I think we would continue with that,
Okay.
rather than try to.
Put it in like some kind of fancy energy management system.
Well, we're going to consider that too.
We would like to get those programmers so that after 2 hours, it'll default to be programmed.
Yes, sir. They do have those programmable Wi-Fi that are only like $100, $200 a thermostat. And Energy has rebates that'll help offset that. But it knows it only takes an hour and a half to reach set point, and it'll give you like a 2-hour override. If somebody comes in and presses, okay, I want some air, after 2 hours, it'll go back to an unoccupied set point or whatever you have it scheduled at. So, yeah. All right, next slide. Again, we talked about this. These are some of the controls that the church did have. These are what, again, if HVAC costs us 70%, how I control my systems is vital to how we use energy. Go ahead and next slide, please. These are some of the set points when we identified, again, this is for the church, and let me say, whoever wears the hat of facility management, it's hard for that individual to go to every thermostat every single day to try to implement a program. So I think a lot of these, I saw overrides. So somebody pushed hold. So these are just some of the zones that were running 24 hours a day in those respective zones, and that's just really expensive. So I think the church could really benefit if you considered Wi-Fi enabled thermostat. That would help with the facility team. And I wanted to monetize it for you. So the thing you see at the bottom right-hand portion, a very conservative, what if I just changed our runtime? So I said 15 hours a day because it cycles on and off throughout the day to hold set point. Assuming you're running 15 hours a day, if I just change that by 2 hours, the church would save $3,400 per year. And that's just by slightly changing it. I'm not saying change your unoccupied set point to 40 degrees, right, or 90 degrees. I'm saying instead of holding 68 degrees all the time, maybe we consider bumping it up. Because every degree you change, you save 1.5% on the HVAC portion of your bill. All right, any questions? All right, next slide. So, yes? The 1.5, yes, ma'am. So if you average 70 degrees, and instead of cooling at 70 all the time, I just bump it up be a little conservative to 72. That's potentially a 3% savings on the HVAC portion of your bill. So, yep, every degree you change, gas and electric, it really impacts. So, again, a typical church, we would see why am I conditioning every room, like if I have that kind of control, and I think that's one of the things that your church wants to head to, and I think in many areas you can, but if I'm only using the upper right-hand room, why am I conditioning everything, right? So these are some of the things we see. Zoning, can I only condition the zone, like you said earlier, there's so many different rooms on the educational building, can I only condition the room I'm using and put everything else in a healthy, unoccupied set point? And I know that's easy for me to say, because I'm not the facility manager here, and I know y'all have schedules that are different. I definitely understand that, but if we could control, that's going to save a lot of energy. Second thing, that larger zone on the upper right hand, let's just assume that's conditioned by a 10-ton unit. The zone right above it, let's assume that's conditioned by a 2-ton unit. Let's schedule meetings in the zone conditioned by a 2-ton unit versus the 10-ton unit, right? Because it's going to use a lot less energy. These are things, right? He's called us to be good stewards, and these are some of the things that we can look at. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Set points. I might get some pushback here, but I try to recommend everything based on Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Energy. I'm a big believer in implementing an unoccupied set point. So when the zone's not occupied, again, you know your building better than I do, you know the strength of the building envelope, and you know how long it takes each zone to reach a set point. But if I can bump my unoccupied, EPA recommends 55 degrees for heating, 85 degrees for cooling when you're not in use. Maybe that doesn't work here, so maybe you do 60 and 80. Maybe do 62 and 78, something that you think makes sense. But the rule of thumb is if I'm unoccupied for 4 hours or more, it makes sense to implement an unoccupied set point, right? So I won't get into all these, but every degree you change, EPA recommends 74 for cooling, 60, 68 for heating, again, whatever works for you. But
Just as a point, the air conditioning's on right now,
it is, okay? Well, it feels comfortable.
rather than the heater.
Yeah, but you know some things we see a lot are these two thermostats heating, these two thermostats are cooling, and what does that cause? That we see that a lot in larger areas like a sanctuary, a fellowship hall. But that's, again, the facility team, it's hard because somebody might press hold over here at 68. Oh, I'm too cold, so I'm gonna bump this one up, you know, and I'm gonna hit hold, and that's really, really expensive. And I think in the winter months here, that might have been happening in areas.
We watch them and we keep people from doing it.
Okay, do you tackle them as that's a thermostat? I'm just kidding. Stun gun, okay. It's real long. Okay. I mean, I'm not going to hit every single one of these, but controls too, do we need long control times? Do they have to operate 24 hours a day? Can they operate 8 hours a day? These are some of the things that we look at. Go ahead and go to the next slide, if you don't mind. This is a college we did in California. The thermal pictures right there you see in the upper right-hand corner, that area was cool. They were cooling, but then they had the electric strip heat on, and then they had the garage door open. So not only were they cooling, and then they were heating, but then they were mixing it together and throwing it out the door. So these are some of the things I see. Now, I will say this is something you can take home. It's called deadband. The upper left-hand example there is when I have a heating set point of 70, a cooling set point of 72, that gives me a 2-degree difference, what we call a delta. What could be happening is those set points are overlapping and they're not satisfied, and you're cycling back and forth between heating and cooling. EPA recommends a 5 to 6 degree difference so that these numbers don't overlap. Does that make sense? So these are something you can take home.
That is take home, yes.
Yes, take it home. I just saved you millions of dollars. Oh, can you go back one more real quick? So what do you see wrong with that thermostat location?
In a basement?
Well, close. That's a microwave right next to it. Yeah. And so check your thermostat location. It's underneath a coffee pot. It's underneath a microwave, a printer, a copier. It rejects heat and causes that thermostat to misread. Or the sunlight comes in and just hits it for 3 hours. And if you know why a zone is either too hot or too cold, you know, at times at home, that might be one of the areas. So, all right. I won't get into this too much. Will you have outside air control on this potentially new design, or is that to be determined? To be determined. Okay. Especially with COVID, when COVID came, people wanted a lot of air exchange, so they would open up these outside air, and I understand. But when the building is not in use, the outside air dampers, if you have control of them, should be closed. When people are in the building, then it should come on as CO2 rises, right? It should fluctuate. But when it's open all the time, in this hot July humid area, especially by Kemah and Galveston, you have all this humid air. And just so you understand the science behind it, I have to cool that, I have to wring the humidity out, or I'm gonna have black mold everywhere. It's gonna be hot and humid. I have to cool it to 32 degrees in the summer, right, to wring all the humidity. And then I have to heat it to get it from 32 to 55 degree supply air temperature. So when you have outside air dampers open, I understand we need it from a fresh air. We don't want people to get sick. It's an indoor air quality. But when that zone is not occupied, those dampers should be closed because it is so expensive to dehumidify a building. So these are some of the things that the team has been looking at and putting strategies together to help minimize. All right, so imagine with me, right? If opposed to me just operating in 100% of my building, conditioning 100% of my building, 24 hours a day, right? With outside air dampers open 100%, what if I could close my outside air dampers, implement an occupied schedule per zone, and only condition the zones that we use? We could make a almost 40% impact on energy savings, all at no cost. Again, it's easier said than done. I realize there's so many different factors that go into that, but there's every church, there's areas of opportunity and areas for improvement. And I'm not saying keep everything off, right? So you have to wear a jacket or you're sweating. You want people to be comfortable. But we don't have to condition everything all the time. So anyways, that's all I'm saying on that. So this is lighting. I got about 15, 20 minutes. So this is lighting. So the quick examples you have, and I'm sorry you can't see it, you have what we call those T12s on the far right-hand side. I'm going to get a little closer here. Far right-hand side, you have T12s, right, which is 34 watts. You have T8s, which are 32 watts. And then you have T5s, which are equivalent to LED. I just want you to see the cost difference between the fixtures. So these T12s, I'm going to spend about $5,100 a year. If I change those over to LED, right, assuming everything stays constant, I'm only going to spend $1,350 per year on energy. So that's a 74% or 73% energy savings, right? So these are some of the things that we look. So, but when you're moving over from like a LEDs brighter that lasts longer, it's like 50,000 hour runtime. So instead of needing 4 fixtures, maybe I move over to a 2 fixture. So you're going from 160 watts per fixture to 32 watts per fixture. That's a huge impact on energy savings. So there's a lot that we can do there. And then there's that 23-second rule again. So something you can take home.
I have a question.
Yeah.
People have told me, some people have told me, that if you turn the lights on and off, on and off, on and off, that the fixture or the light bulb will go out sooner.
Yeah, if I'm in and out of my office all the time, like you see with the motion sensors, in a sense, do that, and the bulbs typically still last a long time, but yeah, it's probably going to damage it, and it's going to depreciate a little bit faster. But a lot of these areas that have motion sensors and people that are in and out of these zones, they go on and off quite a bit as well, but
But it's still better.
We'll still save more money if we turn them off for 23 seconds.
I mean, unless you're in and out of your room like 60 times an hour. But if you're a typical office, you're leaving once or twice an hour. Highly recommend 23 seconds. Okay. So, but you have to have a stopwatch with you. So if it's not 23 seconds, you have to keep the lights on. Just kidding. So the church, when we came in 2015, we saw a lot of older lamps. The church is beginning to implement LED lamps. I think Hendrix is not, correct?
I think that's the only building that we
Yeah, but
haven't at least turned over most of.
but everything else the church is beginning to implement. Have maybe 80% of the church is now LED, and you can't get more efficient than LED. So that's all.
Lights up here, too, stage lights.
Oh, those that are kind of shining up right now. Those are so. But sometimes those are on 5 hours a week maybe, but they're so expensive to replace. Yes, sir.
I was going to comment, we have changed out a lot of bulbs in the HEB from the fluorescents to the LED.
Yes, sir.
Another comment I would make is when we put those LEDs in the other parts of the church, when they go out, they are not readily replaceable.
Sure.
Means I'll probably have to take the whole fixture out.
Yeah.
The older fixture that you use
Yeah.
when it goes out, it's not so nice.
Yeah. And typically when you go in and you replace the bulbs with linear fluorescence, you'll have to bypass the ballast, because there's not a ballast factor. And in the worship center, so these are, you said these are LED?
Yeah, they've been there since just after you came here the first time.
Do they have the dimmability factor that you like? Is like, okay. Yes, sir?
All right.
Here you go.
I'm just saying, these bulbs have been here since he was here last time. And, oh, thank you.
Are they dimmable?
Yeah, are they dimmable? Yes, they are dimmable.
I guess it's not working. So, yeah, the lights aren't, yeah. And sometimes when you put LEDs in worship settings, they don't have the dimmability factor to give you the comfort for worship. So sometimes, but y'all like them. They're here and they give. Dim them much anyway. So. Okay. Christmas Eve. Got the candles, the candlelight service.
Healing and wholeness services.
All right. But you can see in some of the fixtures, the church went from 160 watts to 32 watts. I don't have to do 4 lamps. I can do 2 lamps in those areas where you have those linear fluorescents. Okay, next slide. We're nearing the end here, so hang with me. We did an audit at Harvard up in Boston. This is where we actually started the company, right after seminary. And if you look, that's a double pane window on the thermal scan on the left, and then you can see a single pane window. So there's an 8-degree delta or an 8-degree difference from a double pane versus a single pane. So point being, the stronger your building envelope, the less I'm going to use, less energy I'm going to need to heat or cool my facility. And go ahead, next slide. The church, we identified a number in 2015, single pane windows, and the church is in the process of moving those over to double pane glaze. No, I'm wrong.
2. We replaced
2's better than 0.
1 room.
Okay. Well, you're still in the process, so 2's better than 0. And a lot of the doors, again, when you see a lot of egress or entrance and exit for church, you're just going to see the weather stripper naturally depreciate, and that causes buildings are positive pressure that air goes out of the building. But the church is beginning to look into.
We replaced all our weather stripping and all
Okay.
the exterior doors.
Great. All right, next slide. Now, plug load. Has anybody heard of phantom load? Yes, ma'am. Vampire. So even when something is plugged into the wall, even if it's off, it's still going to draw power. So up to 75% of plug load is phantom or vampire load. I like phantom load better.
75%?
Up to. Yes, ma'am. So Cinda has been very, if I don't get back to her, which is good, she wants to make an impact. So some of the things that the church is looking at is wanting to create a beta program where we can just test out a few of these smart strips. And I finally sent you the smart strip. That's my fault. That, just we're going to find an area where we can put these smart strips, plug in these larger items to help. What that does is it cuts off the phantom load. When that device wants to come on, it opens it back up, but it minimizes phantom load.
Are those available?
On Amazon, at Amazon, or Walmart.
Oh, good.
She was asking if they were available.
Yeah, just to someone to put in our own homes.
Yes, ma'am. If you want to really get tricky, you can put every plug load, make it kind of a virtual and connect it to a big computer screen, and you can actually see every outlet, but that is really expensive. Yes, ma'am. Yes, that is one I sent you. Maybe you could send it out in the email. I sent her an example of one too. That there's a lot. You can just throw it in Google and just say smart strip, and it'll come up with some options for you and where to buy them at Walmart or Home Depot, etc. All right. Yep. Some of the things that the church is looking into. Next slide. These are just the last few slides. I will say this. This is the only thing I'll say. Domestic hot water tanks, they're on 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for, 5 minutes of hot water a week, unless you have showers in the church. I'm a big believer in on-demand. Even in residential, I'm a big believer in on-demand, but especially in churches where you're not using a lot of hot water, What you could do is add a time clock to some of these hot water tanks if it's electric. It's harder to do that with gas-fired hot water tanks, but it's just like a thermostat. Instead of heating it 365 days a year, you're putting some kind of control, and it's minimizing its heating element when it's not in use. All right, next slide.
So are tankless water heaters, is that one that is,
Yeah, it has a heating element on it, but it's really just heating it when it's called for, opposed to just keeping a 50-gallon tank going at 120 degrees 24 hours a day. These are just a few examples, and I have y'all in here too, but Stonebriar, they identified $22,000 in energy savings, all at no cost. Next slide. We did Summit Church up in North Carolina. They identified $30,000 in savings, mostly related to behavior. They want to use those savings to support their mission of International Mission Board, which is our heart. We get excited when we see savings redirected back to the call of the church, mission ministry. This is one we identified in Connecticut, and they want to fund work in Congo with their energy savings. Next slide. There's two more. This is Montana school, Christian school. We identified about $15,000 in savings, but they're using those savings and capturing them to fund a solar system, a photovoltaic system on their roof. And then here y'all are, right? We've identified potential savings of $30,000 or over $18,000, or excuse me, 30% or $18,000. A portion of that is related to behavior change, and I think the church has already began to implement a big portion of what we identified. And then the last slide. Nope, I lied. It's not the last slide. So this is your utility company. They're mandated. Actually, if you look at your utility bill, you're paying into this energy efficient fund. So they capture all this money and they give it away, first come, first serve, to energy efficient projects. A new HVAC system, new lighting, new windows, things like that. So they will give you funding, but you have to reach out to them. So here's the information, and when Cinda sends the slides out and the deck out, you'll be able to see that. And that's it. So nobody fell asleep. It's good. It's a lot of information. It's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. But I do have an ebook that we just give away. We don't charge anything. I hope you didn't pay for that book. It's not a New York Times bestseller. But it just talks a lot about what we talked about today. What is demand? What can we do? So I'll send you that ebook, and maybe you can send it out to the team. Yes, ma'am. All right. Thank you, guys.
Sammy, am I on? Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for coming. And we have cookies and cocoa. Colby's going to stay around if you have individual questions for him. He'll be here for a little while. He has to catch a plane tomorrow morning, so he doesn't want to stay around very long. Oh, it's canceled.
Well, there's a big storm in California, so they just canceled the flights.
Okay. Well, in that case, you can just monopolize this time. Right. Okay. Thank you.